Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched the alien delegates ignore him. The Galactic Council chamber was huge and filled with creatures from 1,000 worlds. They all thought humans were stupid and weak. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 5 years, and every time was the same. The aliens would talk about important things and then tell humans to wait their turn. The Zalarian delegate stood up on his 6 legs and clicked his mandibles. High Counselor Vextar was tall and covered in purple scales that shimmered under the bright lights. He looked at Jake with his big black eyes and made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. The human representative wants advanced shield technology again, Vextar said to the other delegates. Perhaps they should focus on learning to build proper spaceship engines first. Their fastest vessels barely reach 1% of light speed. More laughter filled the chamber. Jake kept his face calm, but inside he was smiling. If only these aliens knew what was really happening in the dark spaces around Earth. If only they could see what Admiral Lisa Carter was building right now, in the cold emptiness beyond Pluto. Far from the council chamber and the mocking aliens, Admiral Carter floated in her command pod deep inside a massive construction site. Around her, millions of human workers and robots carved tunnels through rock and metal. They were not building a space station or a mining facility. They were turning an entire dwarf planet into the most powerful warship the galaxy had ever seen. Carter pressed her hand against the viewing port and looked out at the work crews. Sparks flew from welding torches as they installed the last of the main cannon arrays. The dwarf planet had been called Series 7 when they started 10 years ago. Now it was the Titan-class planetary warship New Earth, home to 50 million humans and enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. Admiral, the final power cores are coming online, said Captain Bill Rogers from his station. He was young but had spent his whole life training for this moment. Like all the workers here, he had been born in one of the secret colonies that existed in the dark between worlds. Carter nodded and activated her communicator. Dr. Stone, what is our status on the main weapon systems? Dr. Richard Stone was floating in the engineering section, surrounded by holographic displays showing power readings and system diagnostics. He had gray hair and tired eyes from working for 30 years on humanity's greatest secret. He was one of the few people old enough to remember when the project began, when Earth first realized the aliens would never accept them as equals. All systems show green, Admiral, Stone replied. The quantum fusion reactors are stable and the mass driver cannons are calibrated. We could level a continent from 1,000 light-years away if we wanted to. Stone looked at the readings and felt proud of what humanity had accomplished. Every piece of technology in New Earth had been stolen, reverse-engineered, or improved from alien designs. The Galactic Council had refused to share their knowledge, thinking humans were too primitive to understand it. They were wrong about the understanding part. When the first human diplomat had visited the Council 300 years ago, the aliens had laughed then too. They gave humans a few basic technologies and told them to be grateful. What they did not know is that humans were very good at taking things apart and making them better. Carter moved through the corridors of New Earth and saw the proof of human determination everywhere. Cities existed inside the hollowed-out planetoid, complete with parks and schools and shopping centers. Children played in artificial gravity fields, while their parents worked in factories that could build starships faster than any alien world. The artificial star at the center of New Earth provided power and light to the millions of people who called this place home. It was not just a weapon. It was a complete human civilization, hidden in the darkness where aliens never looked. Admiral Carter to all department heads, she announced through the ship-wide communication system. Report to the main briefing room in 1 hour. We have received priority communications from Earth Command. In the briefing room, Carter looked at the faces of her senior officers. These were the men and women who had spent their lives preparing for a war that aliens thought would never come. They knew about the other Titan-class ships being built in secret locations throughout the galaxy. They knew about the hidden human colonies that existed in the space between stars. The Korthak Empire is mobilizing, Carter announced. Intelligence. Reports indicate they are preparing for a galaxy-wide conquest. Earth Command believes they will move within the next 6 months. Colonel Janet Walsh, the ship's military commander, leaned forward in her chair. She'd been training human soldiers in secret for 20 years. Her troops were enhanced with alien biotechnology and armed with weapons that combined the best of human engineering with stolen alien designs. "Are we finally going to show ourselves?" Walsh asked. Carter nodded slowly. "The Council of Elders has made their decision. 3 centuries of hiding in the darkness ends now. When the Korthak begin their attack, they will discover that humanity is not the weak species they believe us to be." Dr. Stone pulled up a holographic display showing the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of other Titan-class warships. Blue dots showed hidden human bases and manufacturing facilities. Green dots indicated allied species who had been secretly working with humanity. "We have 47 Titan-class vessels, ready for combat," Stone reported. "Each one carries between 20 and 60 million humans. Our manufacturing capability exceeds the combined output of the top 10 alien civilizations." Carter studied the display and felt a mix of pride and sadness. Humanity had been forced to hide their true nature for 3 centuries because aliens could not accept them as equals. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when humans stopped pretending to be weak. Back in the council chamber, Jake Morrison received a coded message on his personal communicator. The time for pretending was almost over. Soon he would stand before these mocking aliens and reveal the truth about humanity's real capabilities. The Galactic Council had made a terrible mistake when they decided humans were not worth their respect. They had given humanity the greatest gift possible: underestimation. While the aliens focused on their own politics and ignored the primitive humans, humanity had been building the most powerful fleet in galactic history. Admiral Carter looked out at the stars from the observation deck of New Earth. Somewhere out there, the Korthak Empire was preparing to conquer the galaxy. They thought it would be easy because they believed the established species were weak and divided. They had no idea that while the galaxy slept, humanity had been preparing for war. The first reports came through the Galactic Communication Network at 0347 Standard Time. The Korthak Empire had launched surprise attacks on 12 major civilizations simultaneously. Their biomechanical warships moved through space like living nightmares, tearing apart everything in their path. Admiral Peter Hayes stood on the bridge of Guardian Prime and watched the emergency transmissions flood in from across the galaxy. His Titan-class warship had been stationed at the edge of known space for 15 years, waiting for this moment. The massive planetoid hung in the darkness between stars, invisible to any sensors the galaxy possessed. "Sir, we are receiving distress calls from the Altarian system," reported Lieutenant Commander Nancy Brown from her communication station. "The Korthak fleet is moving toward Earth." Hayes nodded and activated the ship-wide alert system. Throughout Guardian Prime, 58 million humans began preparing for combat. They had trained for this day their entire lives. Children learned tactical analysis before they learned to read. Adults worked in weapon factories and simulation chambers. Everyone knew their role in humanity's greatest revelation. The Galactic Council's emergency session was chaos. Ambassador Jake Morrison watched alien delegates panic as their homeworlds fell to Korthak forces. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years were fleeing like scared animals. High Counselor Vextar's purple scales had turned pale gray with fear. "The Korthak bioships are immune to our weapons," he announced to the chamber. "They adapt to any attack within minutes. We need to evacuate the core worlds immediately." Other delegates shouted in their various languages. The mighty galactic civilization that had dismissed humanity was crumbling in hours. Morrison sat quietly and waited for the coded signal from Earth Command. Soon these aliens would learn that they had badly misjudged the human race. Captain Susan Blake checked her fighter systems one final time. She commanded Raptor Squadron, 36 of humanity's most advanced combat pilots. They had been born and raised in the zero-gravity training facilities hidden throughout the solar system. While alien pilots thought in 2 dimensions, humans had learned to fight in 3. "All Raptors, this is Blake," she transmitted to her squadron. "Today we show the galaxy what human pilots can do. Remember your training and trust your instincts. The enemy thinks space combat is about big ships shooting at each other. We are going to teach them about precision. The Korthak battle fleet approaching Earth was massive. 300 biomechanical warships moved in perfect formation, their living hulls pulsing with dark energy. They had conquered 17 civilizations, using the same tactics, overwhelmed the enemy with superior numbers and adaptive technology. What the Korthak did not expect was Guardian Prime. Admiral Hayes gave the order, and his planet-sized warship decloaked directly in the path of the Korthak fleet. The enemy ship stopped moving as their commanders tried to understand what they were seeing. The largest Korthak vessel was 5 kilometers long. Guardian Prime was over 12,000 kilometers in diameter. "This is Admiral Peter Hayes of the Terran Defense Force," he broadcast on all frequencies. "You have entered human space without permission. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Korthak fleet commander responded with typical arrogance. His bioship's living hull changed color as he spoke, the alien equivalent of showing anger and contempt. "Unknown vessel, you will surrender or be destroyed. No single ship can stand against the might of the Korthak Empire." Hayes smiled and turned to his weapons officer. "Commander Kelly, demonstrate our point defense systems." Tony Mitchell worked frantically in the engineering section of Guardian Prime as the massive weapon arrays came online. The artificial star at the heart of the ship provided more power than most civilizations used in a year. Energy flowed through quantum conduits to cannons that could crack planets in half. The first Korthak attack was standard procedure. They launched 1,000 biomissiles at the human ship, each one designed to adapt to enemy defenses and burrow through armor plating. The living projectiles moved through space like angry wasps. Guardian Prime's point defense grid activated, and the darkness lit up with energy beams. Each human cannon was controlled by artificial intelligence that could track and destroy targets, faster than biological minds could process. The biomissiles died by the hundreds as precise laser fire cut them apart. Not a single Korthak weapon reached the human ship. Captain Blake launched from Guardian Prime's massive fighter bays along with 5,000 other human pilots. The Raptor fighters were small and fast, designed to use the three-dimensional nature of space combat that aliens had never mastered. The Korthak had evolved on a water world where combat was mostly horizontal. Their tactics reflected this limitation. They arranged their ships in flat formations and expected enemies to attack from predictable angles. Blake led her squadron in a vertical dive that took the enemy completely by surprise. Human fighters attacked from above and below simultaneously, while the main Korthak fleet was still trying to process Guardian Prime's defensive display. "Target their sensor clusters," Blake ordered her pilots. "These bioships adapt to damage, but they need to see us first." The battle became a masterclass in human tactical thinking. While Korthak commanders tried to adapt their weapons to Guardian Prime's defenses, human fighters systematically destroyed their ability to coordinate attacks. The living warships began to panic as their sensory systems failed. Engineer Mitchell brought the main cannons online, and Admiral Hayes watched with satisfaction as quantum energy beams reached out across space. Each shot was precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy. Humanity wanted prisoners and intelligence, not just victory. The Korthak battle fleet that had conquered 12 civilizations was reduced to helpless debris in less than 2 hours. Their bioships floated in space, alive but crippled, their adaptive systems overwhelmed by human precision and firepower. Throughout the galaxy, species that had fled from Korthak attacks received the battle recordings. They watched in amazement as a single human vessel defeated an entire conquest fleet. The primitive species they had dismissed for centuries had just demonstrated military superiority that surpassed anything in known space. Back in the council chamber, Ambassador Morrison stood up as the final Korthak ship was disabled. The alien delegates stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to terror. The balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted completely. "Honorable delegates," Morrison announced calmly, "humanity would like to request a formal review of our membership status in the Galactic Council. It appears our previous applications may have been based on incomplete information about our capabilities." High Counselor Vextar's legs trembled as he realized the truth. For 3 centuries, the most powerful military force in the galaxy had been sitting quietly in council chambers, asking politely for basic technologies while secretly building weapons that made their own fleets obsolete. The sleeping giant had awakened, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from every major civilization crowded into the chamber, their faces showing fear and confusion. The Korthak attack had shattered their understanding of galactic power, but the human response had destroyed their understanding of reality itself. Ambassador Jake Morrison walked to the center of the chamber and activated the holographic display system. For 3 centuries, he had stood in this same spot asking for basic technologies while aliens laughed at humanity's primitive nature. Today, he would reveal the greatest deception in galactic history. Honorable delegates, Morrison began, humanity has been less than completely honest about our capabilities. The massive screens around the chamber came to life, showing images from the battle at Earth. Guardian Prime filled the displays, its planet-sized bulk dwarfing the Korthak fleet. Alien delegates gasped as they watched human fighters move through space in ways that defied everything they knew about combat tactics. High Counselor Vextar stood on his shaking legs and pointed at the screen with one of his clawed hands. This is impossible. Our scouts have surveyed the human system extensively. There are no structures of this size anywhere near Earth. Morrison smiled and changed the display to show a star map of human space. Red dots appeared throughout the galaxy, each one marking a location where humanity had been secretly building for centuries. The dots formed a network that stretched from the galactic core to the outer rim. The Zalarian survey ships were looking in the wrong places, Morrison explained. We have been expanding into the dark spaces between stars where no species bothers to explore. While you focused on habitable worlds and resource-rich systems, humanity claimed the empty void. Admiral Lisa Carter's image appeared on the communication screen as her massive ship, New Earth, approached the galactic core. The Titan-class warship moved slowly through space, its artificial gravity fields bending light around its enormous hull. Smaller vessels that would normally be considered battleships looked like insects flying around a mountain. I am Admiral Carter of the Terran Defense Force, she announced to the assembled delegates. For 300 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment. We knew the galaxy would never accept us as equals, so we decided to become something greater. The chamber erupted in panicked voices as representatives realized the implications. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were suddenly faced with a civilization that had surpassed them while hiding in plain sight. Dr. Richard Stone appeared on another screen, broadcasting from the research facilities deep inside New Earth. Behind him, massive manufacturing complexes stretched into the distance, producing starships at a rate that seemed impossible. Our quantum assembly systems can construct a heavy cruiser in 6 hours, Stone explained to the stunned delegates. A battleship takes 2 days. The manufacturing capacity of a single Titan-class vessel exceeds the combined shipbuilding capability of the 10 most advanced galactic civilizations. Stone activated a demonstration that showed the human manufacturing process in action. Raw materials flowed through molecular assemblers that built ships from the atomic level up. The technology was based on alien designs that humanity had reverse-engineered and improved beyond recognition. Commander Rachel Turner piloted her reconnaissance ship through the outer systems, documenting the deployment of additional human forces. The 3rd and 4th Titan-class vessels were moving into position, their massive forms creating gravitational anomalies that could be detected from light years away. Fortress Sol is taking position at the galactic barrier, Turner reported to Admiral Carter. Vanguard has moved to secure the trade routes between the inner worlds. Both ships report full combat readiness. Each Titan-class vessel was more than just a warship. They were complete human civilizations, carrying populations that exceeded most alien homeworlds. The ships contained universities, research facilities, manufacturing centers, and military academies. They were humanity's answer to the question of how to survive in a galaxy that refused to accept them. The alien delegates watched in growing horror as more human vessels appeared on the tactical displays. Ships emerged from hidden bases in asteroid fields and nebulae. Battle fleets decloaked from positions they had held for decades. The galaxy was full of human forces that had been invisible until now. Morrison continued his presentation, showing the delegates exactly how humanity had accomplished the impossible. We used your own dismissive attitudes against you. Every time you refused to share technology, we stole it and made it better. Every time you laughed at our primitive ships, we built better ones in secret. The Altarian representative, her blue skin pale with shock, stood up from her floating chair. How many ships do you have? How many people? Morrison smiled and activated another display. Our current military force consists of 47 Titan-class planetary warships, each carrying between 20 and 60 million humans. We also maintain over 3,000 heavy battleships, 15,000 cruisers, and approximately 50,000 smaller vessels. The numbers were staggering. Humanity had built a military force that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had done it slowly and carefully over 3 centuries, using the alien tendency to ignore primitive species as perfect camouflage. Dr. Stone provided technical details that left alien scientists speechless. Human technology had surpassed galactic standards in every meaningful category. Their weapons were more powerful, their defenses stronger, their ships faster and more maneuverable. Our understanding of physics developed in isolation from galactic mainstream science, Stone explained. This allowed us to explore theoretical possibilities that established civilizations had dismissed as impossible. Dark matter manipulation, quantum entanglement communication, and artificial singularity power generation are standard features of our technology. The revelation that humanity possessed scientific knowledge beyond galactic understanding was the final shock for many delegates. They had spent centuries believing that their civilizations represented the peak of development. Now they discovered that the primitive species they had ignored possessed capabilities that made their own technology seem obsolete. Admiral Carter's face appeared on the main screen as New Earth settled into a stable orbit around the Council Station. The planet-sized warship cast a shadow that darkened entire sections of the facility. The Galactic Council has a choice to make, Carter announced. You can continue to treat humanity as a minor species and face the consequences, or you can accept us as the dominant military power we have become. The age of alien supremacy is over. Morrison looked around the chamber at the faces of delegates who had spent their careers dismissing human potential. The laughter and condescension were gone, replaced by fear and respect. The galaxy had awakened to find that while they slept, humanity had inherited the stars. The Korthak Empire had ruled through fear for 1,000 years, but the defeat of their Earth invasion fleet changed everything. Their biomechanical warships that had conquered dozens of civilizations suddenly seemed small and weak compared to humanity's planet-sized vessels. Emperor Thakmor sat in his living throne aboard the massive bioship Devourer and watched the reports from across the galaxy. 3 more Korthak fleets had been destroyed by human forces in the past week. Each battle followed the same pattern. Korthak ships would attack expecting easy victory, only to face weapons and tactics they could not understand or counter. The Emperor's chitinous shell darkened with rage as he realized the truth. The galaxy was no longer his to conquer. An unknown species had built a military force that made his empire look primitive by comparison. Admiral Ben Foster commanded the 5th Titan-class warship Liberty's Dawn, as it moved through the Centauri Nebula toward the largest space battle in galactic history. 3 Korthak invasion fleets had converged on the nebula, planning to use its energy storms as cover for their advance toward the galactic core. What they found instead was a human fleet that had been waiting for them. Foster stood on his command bridge and watched the tactical displays show enemy positions. The Korthak had brought over 800 warships to this battle, their largest force since the beginning of their expansion. They expected the nebula's interference to disable advanced sensors and reduce the fight to close-range combat, where their bioships held advantages. All human vessels, this is Admiral Foster, he broadcast to the fleet. Execute Battle Plan Prometheus. Show these invaders what happens when they threaten innocent worlds. Captain Laura Price commanded the human battle doctrine from her heavy cruiser determination. She had spent 15 years developing new ways to use humanity's technological advantages in large-scale combat. Her innovations were about to be tested against the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced. All squadrons, implement dispersal pattern 7, Price ordered her fleet commanders. Remember, we are not just fighting for humanity today. Every species in this galaxy is counting on us to stop the Korthak advance. The Battle of Centauri Nebula began with the Korthak, doing exactly what human strategists had predicted. Their bioships moved in tight formations, using their adaptive armor to share defensive capabilities. It was a tactic that had worked against every other species they had encountered. Human forces responded with something the Korthak had never seen before. Instead of matching their tight formations, human ships spread out across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. Each vessel operated independently, while remaining connected through quantum communication networks that ignored the nebula's interference. The Korthak found themselves fighting not one large fleet, but hundreds of smaller groups that appeared and disappeared throughout the nebula. Human ships would emerge from the energy storms, deliver devastating attacks, and vanish before the enemy could respond. Colonel Steve Morgan watched the space battle from the ground as his troops prepared to liberate the Vegan colonies. The Korthak had enslaved over 6 billion beings on 12 worlds in this system. Human forces were about to show the galaxy that their military superiority extended beyond space combat. Morgan's soldiers were different from anything the galaxy had seen before. They wore powered armor that combined human engineering with alien biotechnology. Their weapons fired ammunition that adapted to enemy defenses in real time. Most importantly, they fought with an intensity and determination that terrified their enemies. All units, begin planetary assault, Morgan ordered, as human dropships descended through the atmosphere. Remember, these worlds contain enslaved populations. Precision is more important than speed. The Korthak ground forces had expected to face typical galactic military units armed with standard energy weapons and basic armor. Instead, they encountered humans who treated warfare as a science and had spent centuries perfecting every aspect of combat. Human soldiers moved through Korthak defensive positions like ghosts. Their armor provided perfect camouflage while their weapons fired projectiles that could penetrate any known defense. More importantly, they fought as coordinated units where every soldier understood their role in complex tactical plans. Above the planet, Admiral Foster's fleet demonstrated why human space combat doctrine was revolutionizing warfare. Liberty's Dawn engaged 3 Korthak bioships simultaneously, its massive weapons arrays firing with precision that seemed impossible for such a large vessel. The planet-sized warship moved through space like a dancer rather than a battering ram. Human engineers had solved the fundamental problem of large vessel maneuverability by treating the ship as a collection of smaller units working in perfect harmony. Captain Price coordinated the final phase of the battle as Korthak resistance collapsed throughout the nebula. Human forces had destroyed over 600 enemy vessels while losing fewer than 30 of their own ships. The victory was so complete that surviving Korthak commanders began surrendering rather than face continued slaughter. Admiral Foster, we are receiving surrender transmissions from the remaining Korthak forces, Price reported. They are requesting terms. Foster looked at the tactical display showing the devastation of the enemy fleet. The Korthak Empire's largest military operation had been reduced to scattered survivors in less than 6 hours. The message this would send across the galaxy would be impossible to ignore. Colonel Morgan's ground forces had achieved similar success on the planetary surface. Korthak occupation troops that had terrorized enslaved populations for decades were surrendering to human soldiers they could barely see. The liberated beings watched in amazement as their oppressors fled from warriors who seemed to appear from nowhere. The aftermath of the Battle of Centauri Nebula sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had lived in fear of Korthak expansion suddenly realized that the invaders could be defeated. More importantly, they saw that humanity was willing to fight not just for their own survival, but for the freedom of all galactic civilizations. Emperor Thakmor received the battle reports and felt something his species had never experienced before: true fear. The Korthak Empire had built their power on the belief that they were the ultimate predators. Now they faced a species that hunted predators. Admiral Foster stood on the observation deck of Liberty's Dawn, and watched human ships escort surrendered Korthak vessels to processing centers. The enemy empire was beginning to fracture as their commanders realized that continued resistance meant certain destruction. Throughout the galaxy, species that had hidden from Korthak forces began to fight back. The human example had shown them that the invaders were not invincible. Rebellions erupted on occupied worlds as enslaved populations rose against their oppressors. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely, and everyone knew that humanity was now the dominant force among the stars. The final battle for galactic freedom would be fought in the Korthak home system, where Emperor Thakmor had ruled for 800 years. 7 Titan-class warships moved through hyperspace toward the heart of the enemy empire, carrying the Akar, hopes of every enslaved species in the galaxy. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the command bridge of Terra Invictus, the newest and largest of humanity's planet-sized warships. The massive vessel served as the flagship for the combined human fleet, its artificial cities housing over 90 million people, and its weapon systems capable of destroying entire star systems. Terra Invictus was more than a warship. It represented humanity's true destiny among the stars, a mobile civilization that could travel anywhere in the galaxy and establish human presence wherever it went. The ship contained universities, research centers, manufacturing facilities, and everything needed to build a new world from nothing. Major Frank Kelly coordinated the largest military operation in galactic history from his position in the fleet command center. Over 2 million human vessels were converging on the Korthak home system from dozens of different directions. The attack had been planned for 50 years and involved resources from every human colony in known space. All Titan-class vessels report ready for final approach, Kelly announced to Admiral Carter. Guardian Prime, New Earth, Liberty's Dawn, Fortress Sol, Vanguard, Freedom's Call, and Terra Invictus are in position for coordinated assault. The Korthak home system was the most heavily defended location in their empire. Thousands of bioships patrolled the space around their homeworld, while planetary defense systems that had never been tested in actual combat prepared for the human attack. Emperor Thakmor sat in his palace and watched the approaching human fleet on his strategic displays. The 7 planet-sized warships looked like moving moons as they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of his system. Behind them came a flood of smaller vessels that seemed to stretch across the entire galaxy. "Deploy all defensive fleets," the Emperor ordered his commanders. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we possess will be used in this battle. If we cannot defeat the humans here, our empire dies today." Dr. Richard Stone worked frantically in the research sections of Terra Invictus as he prepared humanity's final secret weapon. For 3 centuries, human scientists had been developing technologies that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Today, they would reveal the ultimate expression of human scientific achievement. "Admiral Carter, the quantum resonance network is ready for activation," Stone reported. "All Titan-class vessels are connected and synchronized. When we activate the system, every human ship in the galaxy will be able to coordinate their actions in real time." The quantum network represented the true scope of human expansion. For hundreds of years, humanity had been placing communication relays in the dark spaces between galaxies. The network connected every human settlement, every hidden base, every secret research facility across known space and beyond. Captain Susan Blake led the first wave of fighter attacks against the Korthak defensive perimeter. Her squadron had grown from 36 pilots to over 50,000, as humanity revealed the true size of their military forces. The pilots were enhanced with biotechnology and trained in combat techniques that made them nearly invincible. "All fighter wings, this is Blake," she transmitted to the massive formation. "Today we end the Korthak threat forever. Show them what human pilots can accomplish when we fight for freedom instead of survival." The battle began with the Korthak doing what they always did when faced with superior numbers. Their bioships formed defensive clusters and prepared to adapt to whatever weapons the humans used against them. They had won 1,000 battles using these tactics and expected this fight to be no different. They were wrong about everything. Admiral Carter activated the quantum resonance network, and suddenly every human vessel in the galaxy was connected in a single coordinated intelligence. Ships separated by thousands of light-years could share targeting data and coordinate attacks with perfect precision. The 7 Titan-class warships moved into formation around the Korthak homeworld and began the most devastating display of firepower the galaxy had ever witnessed. Each planet-sized vessel possessed weapons that could crack moons in half, and they used these weapons with surgical precision to disable rather than destroy. Major Kelly watched the tactical displays as human forces systematically dismantled the Korthak defensive network. Enemy bioships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were reduced to helpless hulks floating in space. The adaptive armor and weapons that had made them so dangerous were useless against human precision and overwhelming firepower. The Korthak ground defenses activated as human landing forces approached their homeworld. Millions of biomechanical warriors emerged from underground bunkers, ready to fight to the death to protect their emperor and their way of life. Colonel Steve Morgan led the planetary assault with troops that had been enhanced far beyond normal human capabilities. His soldiers moved through Korthak defenses like unstoppable forces of nature, their advanced armor and weapons making them nearly invincible against conventional attacks. All ground units, remember our objective. Morgan transmitted to his forces. We are here to capture their leadership and end this war, not to destroy their civilization. These beings can learn to live in peace if we give them the chance. The final confrontation came when human forces reached Emperor Thakmor's palace. The ancient ruler who had conquered dozens of worlds found himself face to face with Colonel Morgan and a squad of human soldiers who seemed more like legends than living beings. Your empire is finished, Morgan told the Emperor through his translator. Surrender now and your people can live in peace. Continue fighting and face complete destruction. Emperor Thakmor looked at the human soldiers and realized that his species had made a terrible mistake. They had built their empire on the belief that strength came from conquest and domination. The humans had shown them that true strength came from unity and the willingness to fight for others instead of just themselves. Dr. Stone stood in the observation section of Terra Invictus and watched as the quantum network revealed the true scope of human expansion. Dozens of additional Titan-class vessels decloaked throughout the galaxy, each one positioned in a location that had been prepared for centuries. The galaxy realized that humanity had not just been building warships in secret. They had been expanding into unexplored regions beyond the galactic rim, establishing colonies and research stations in areas that other species had never imagined could support life. Ambassador Jake Morrison addressed the transformed Galactic Council from his position aboard Terra Invictus. The chamber that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now hosted representatives who understood that the balance of power had shifted permanently. The age of galactic empires built on conquest and oppression is over, Morrison announced. Humanity offers partnership and cooperation to all species willing to live in peace. Those who choose the path of war will face the consequences of challenging a united galaxy. Admiral Carter walked through the corridors of Terra Invictus and saw the future of humanity stretching before them. The ship's manufacturing centers were already producing materials for new colonies in distant galaxies. The research laboratories were developing technologies that would allow humans to explore regions of space that had never been mapped. The secret phase of human expansion was complete. For 3 centuries, humanity had hidden their true nature while building the most powerful civilization in galactic history. Now they could explore the universe openly, backed by a fleet that made them the protectors of freedom throughout known space. The galaxy had learned too late that while they slept, humanity had been preparing to inherit not just the stars, but everything beyond them. The stars had been quiet for 3,000 years. Admiral Kexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the endless void through the crystal walls of his bioship. The vessel pulsed gently around him, its living walls breathing with a rhythm older than most civilizations. He was proud of what his people had built across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 17 worlds, each one a perfect jewel in their crown of conquest. Their ships moved like graceful fish through space, powered by technology that merged flesh and metal into something beautiful and deadly. No other species had ever challenged them. No other species had ever been able to challenge them. Kexthar, touched the control surface with his long, crystalline fingers. The ship responded immediately, showing him reports from across the Empire. Trade was flowing smoothly between the core worlds. The mining colonies were producing rare metals on schedule. Everything was as it should be in their perfect galaxy. Soft chime drew his attention to a new report. Scout ships had found another primitive world in the outer rim. The planet was blue and green, orbiting a yellow star. Early scans showed industrial activity, but nothing impressive. Just another young species playing with fire and crude metals. Sub-Commander Velnara, Kexthar called to his second-in-command. Take a small fleet to investigate this new world. Standard protocols. Velnara bowed her elegant head. Shall we prepare for integration or elimination? Integration, if they show promise. These young species sometimes make useful servants. Kexthar dismissed the matter with a wave. He had seen hundreds of primitive worlds. They were all the same in the end. Far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Murphy was having a very different kind of day. He stood on the bridge of the USS Dakota, a massive ship built in the orbital yards above Mars. The vessel was angular and brutal, covered in thick armor plating and bristling with weapons. It looked like what it was, a machine built for war. Captain, we're getting strange readings from the outer sensors, reported Lieutenant Amy Foster from her station. Something big is moving near the edge of the system. Jake moved to look at the displays. The readings were faint but definitely there. Objects moving faster than anything natural, following paths that suggested intelligence behind them. After 15 years of preparation, it looked like first contact was finally happening. Get me Admiral Rivers on the command channel, Jake ordered, and start warming up the weapon systems just in case. The Earth Defense Force had been ready for this moment since humanity first developed faster-than-light travel. The governments of Earth had learned from their own bloody history. When humans finally met aliens, they would not be caught defenseless. Admiral Kate Rivers received Jake's report aboard the USS Montana, the newest and most powerful ship in the human fleet. The massive dreadnought was 2 kilometers long, armed with railguns that could punch through a mountain and particle beams hot enough to melt steel. Around her, 300 other ships of various sizes prepared for humanity's first meeting with another intelligent species. All ships, this is Admiral Rivers, she broadcast to the fleet. We've waited 15 years for this moment. Remember your training. Hope for peace, but be ready for anything. Commander Lisa Santos checked her systems aboard the USS Liberty, another of Earth's new super dreadnoughts. Her crew was nervous, but ready. They had all grown up hearing stories about humanity's wars, about how their species had nearly destroyed itself before finally learning to work together. Now they would find out if that hard-won wisdom would serve them among the stars. The human fleet moved into formation as the alien contacts grew stronger on their sensors. Earth's factories had been working without rest for years, building ships and weapons based on lessons learned from centuries of human conflict. Every vessel carried the hopes and fears of 8 billion people who had never seen an alien face. Meanwhile, Sub-Commander Velnara's scout fleet approached the strange system with casual confidence. Her bioships were works of art, grown rather, then built, shaped by genetic engineering perfected over millennia. The 5 vessels moved in perfect harmony, their crystal hulls catching the light of the local star. Initial scans complete, reported her sensor officer. The 3rd planet shows signs of industrial civilization. Crude metal constructions in orbit, primitive chemical rockets. They appear to be at the early stages of space travel. Velnara nodded. It was exactly what she had expected. Another young species taking its first stumbling steps beyond its home world. They would be frightened when they saw the Zephyrian ships, but that was normal. Fear was often the beginning of wisdom. Prepare the standard integration protocols, she ordered. Begin with a demonstration of our superiority, then offer them the chance to join the Empire as a client species. Her communications officer activated the translation systems and began preparing the message that had been used successfully on dozens of other worlds. The pattern was always the same. Show overwhelming force, demand submission, then guide the new species into their proper place in the galactic order. Neither fleet fully understood what they were about to encounter. The Zephyrians had never met a species that could match their technology or resist their expansion. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that the idea of serious opposition seemed impossible. The humans had no idea they were about to face an empire that had conquered star systems while Earth was still recovering from its last ice age. They only knew that alien ships were approaching their home, and they would defend it with everything they had. The stage was set for a meeting that would change the galaxy forever. Two very different civilizations, each confident in their own strength, moved toward a collision that neither could fully imagine. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as the distance between the fleets slowly closed. Sub-Commander Velnara watched the primitive metal ships grow larger on her screens. The human vessels looked crude and ugly to her eyes, all sharp angles and thick armor plating. They reminded her of the ancient war machines her people had abandoned thousands of years ago when they learned to grow their ships instead of building them. "How many vessels are we detecting?" she asked her sensor officer. "Approximately 50 ships in the immediate area, Sub-Commander. More are arriving from deeper in the system. Their largest vessels appear to be roughly 2,000 meters in length." Velnara was mildly impressed. Most primitive species could barely manage a few hundred meters for their largest constructions. These creatures showed more promise than usual. Perhaps they would make useful additions to the Empire after all. "Open a communication channel," she ordered. Standard integration protocol. The message that transmitted across space had been crafted by Zephyrian diplomats over centuries of successful conquests. It was designed to be simple and clear, easily understood by even the most primitive minds. The translation computer would handle the language barriers. "Primitive species of the third planet," the message began. "You have been selected for integration into the Zephyrian Empire. Cease all military activities immediately and prepare to receive our representatives. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. You have one of your planetary rotations to comply." Captain Jake Murphy stared at the translation that appeared on his screen. Around him, the bridge of the USS Dakota fell silent as the crew absorbed the alien ultimatum. The first words from another intelligent species in the universe, and they were a demand for surrender. "Sir," Lieutenant Amy Foster said quietly, "are they seriously threatening to destroy our entire civilization?" Jake nodded grimly. "Looks that way. Get me Admiral Rivers immediately." Aboard the USS Montana, Admiral Kate Rivers read the alien message with growing anger. She had hoped for peaceful contact, but these creatures seemed to think humanity would simply roll over and accept slavery. They had badly misjudged the species they were dealing with. "All ships, battle stations," she broadcast to the fleet. "Weapons free. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The human fleet began to spread out into combat formation. Destroyers and cruisers moved to flanking positions while the massive dreadnoughts formed the center line. Gunports opened along the hulls of hundreds of ships, revealing the weapons that humanity had spent 15 years perfecting. Sub-Commander Velnara frowned as she watched the primitive vessels begin to maneuver. Their movements were actually quite sophisticated, showing a level of tactical thinking she had not expected. Perhaps they needed a more dramatic demonstration of Zephyrian superiority. "Target their largest vessel," she commanded. "Fire a warning. Shot across their formation. Not close enough to damage them, but close enough to show them what our weapons can do." The Zephyrian bioships began to glow as their organic weapon systems charged. Crystalline projectiles formed in the living chambers, deep within each vessel, shaped by genetic processes that had been refined over millennia. The projectiles were beautiful things, clear as diamonds and sharp as razors, designed to slice through enemy hulls with surgical precision. 5 streams of crystal death lanced across space toward the human fleet. They were aimed to pass just ahead of the largest human ship, a demonstration shot that would surely terrify the primitives into submission. Captain Steve Collins watched from the bridge of the destroyer USS Phoenix as the alien weapons fire streaked toward Admiral Rivers' flagship. The projectiles were moving fast, but not faster than human sensors could track. More importantly, they looked like a direct attack on the fleet commander. "All weapons open fire," Collins shouted. Protect the flagship. The standing orders were clear. Any hostile action against the fleet would be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. Collins did not hesitate to pull the trigger on humanity's first interstellar war. The USS Phoenix opened fire with everything it had. Railgun rounds accelerated to tremendous speeds, particle beams hot enough to boil metal, and nuclear-tipped torpedoes that could crack asteroids. Other human ships followed suit, filling space with a storm of deadly energy and metal. Velnara had exactly 3 seconds to realize her mistake before the human weapons reached her ship. The warning shots she had fired were being interpreted as a direct attack. The primitive species was not cowering in fear. They were fighting back with a fury that defied all her expectations. The first railgun rounds punched through her bioship's hull like it was made of paper. The crystalline structure that had seemed so elegant and strong crumpled under the impact of simple kinetic energy, delivered at impossible speeds. Atmosphere rushed out through dozens of holes as her beautiful vessel began to die around her. Impossible, she whispered as her ship's living systems began to shut down. They are primitives. How can they hurt us? The answer came in the form of a particle beam that sliced her flagship in half. The other 4 ships in her scout fleet lasted only seconds longer, before they too were reduced to glowing debris scattered across the void. Admiral Kate Rivers watched the alien vessels disintegrate with mixed feelings. The immediate threat was over, but this was clearly just the beginning. These aliens had threatened to destroy all of humanity. They would not take this defeat quietly. Secure the area and begin salvage operations, she ordered. Get our science teams out here to examine the wreckage. We need to learn everything we can about their technology. Captain Amy Foster coordinated the cleanup from the USS Virginia, one of the newer super dreadnoughts that had arrived as reinforcements. The alien ships were unlike anything human engineers had ever seen. They appeared to be grown rather than built, using some kind of biological technology that was completely foreign to human understanding. Admiral, she reported, we're detecting some kind of transmission from the wreckage. It looks like a distress signal heading back toward alien space. Rivers nodded grimly. The surviving aliens would know exactly what had happened here. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, by destroying the ships of what was clearly a much older and more advanced civilization. All ships return to Earth immediately, she commanded. We need to prepare for whatever's coming next. The first battle was over, but both sides knew it was only the beginning. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Zephyrian Empire was learning that they were no longer alone in the galaxy, and they were not going to be happy about it. The emergency message reached Admiral Keksthar's flagship 3 days after the destruction of Velnara's scout fleet. He read the transmission twice before the impossible words finally sank into his mind. 5 Zephyrian bioships destroyed. Completely annihilated. By primitives using crude kinetic weapons. This cannot be accurate, he said to his communications officer. Run a full analysis of the transmission, check for corruption or interference. The officer worked frantically at his station for several minutes before looking up with fear in his eyes. The message is genuine, Admiral. Our ships were destroyed by the primitive species, all hands lost. Keksthar felt something he had never experienced before in his 3 centuries of life. For the first time in Zephyrian history, their ships had been defeated in battle. Not damaged or disabled, but completely destroyed by a species they had dismissed as barely intelligent. Send word to all fleet commanders, he ordered, his voice cold with rage. I want every available ship assembled for immediate departure. We will show these creatures what happens when they dare to resist the Empire. The largest fleet in Zephyrian history began to gather at the edge of their space. Over 1,000 bioships of every class, from small scouts to massive battle cruisers that could destroy entire planets. The pride of the Empire demanded nothing less than the complete extermination of the species that had dared to spill Zephyrian blood. Meanwhile, Earth was preparing for war with the desperate efficiency that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. General Paul Martinez stood in the command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, watching status reports flow in from across the solar system. How many ships do we have operational? He asked his aide. 512. Vessels of all classes, General. The Mars shipyards are working around the clock to finish the ships still under construction, but we need at least another month. Martinez nodded grimly. The intelligence teams had been studying the wreckage of the alien scout ships, and what they had learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The aliens possessed technology that was thousands of years ahead of humanity in some areas, but they had apparently never developed the kind of heavy weapons that humans took for granted. What about the defensive platforms? Installation is proceeding on schedule. We should have the asteroid belt fully weaponized within 2 weeks. The plan was simple but desperate. Earth's entire industrial capacity had been converted to war production. Automated factories throughout the solar system were churning out weapons, ammunition, and defensive systems at a rate that would have been impossible for any previous generation of humans to imagine. Captain Amy Foster watched the construction efforts from the bridge of the USS Virginia, one of the newest super dreadnoughts to roll out of the Martian shipyards. The massive vessel was over 2 kilometers long and armed with enough firepower to level a small country. Around her, dozens of similar ships were conducting final training exercises before the alien fleet arrived. "Captain," her weapons officer reported, "we're detecting movement at the edge of sensor range. Something big is coming." Foster felt her heart skip a beat. Long-range sensors had been tracking the approaching alien fleet for days, but this was the first time they had appeared. On short-range detection, the enemy was finally here. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships to battle stations, this is it." Admiral Kate Rivers received the alert aboard the USS Montana as the human fleet moved into defensive formation around Earth's moon. The plan was to use Luna's gravity well as a tactical advantage, forcing the aliens to approach through carefully prepared kill zones where human weapons would have maximum effect. "How many ships are we looking at?" she asked her sensor officer. "Still counting, Admiral. At least 800 confirmed contacts, possibly more. They're maintaining perfect formation at long range." Rivers felt a chill run down her spine. 800 ships against humanity's 500. The odds were bad, but not impossible. Earth's weapons had proven effective against alien technology, and human tactics were designed around fighting superior numbers. "All ships, prepare to execute Plan Delta," she broadcast to the fleet. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for the future of our species." The alien fleet dropped out of hyperspace in a display that would have intimidated any other species in the galaxy. Over 1,000 bioships appeared simultaneously, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the light of Earth's sun. They moved, in perfect synchronization, like a vast school of predatory fish closing in on their prey. Admiral Kexthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the crude human vessels scramble into defensive positions. The primitives had managed to destroy one small scout fleet through luck and treachery, but now they faced the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. "Begin the attack," he commanded. "I want every ship destroyed, and every world in this system reduced to ash. These creatures will serve as an example to any other species that might consider resistance." The bioships began to accelerate toward Earth, their organic weapon systems charging for the battle that would determine the fate of humanity. Behind them, the vast emptiness of space seemed to hold its breath as 2 civilizations prepared to fight for the right to exist. Captain Steve Collins watched the approaching armada from the bridge of the USS Phoenix, one of the destroyers assigned to the outer defense perimeter. The alien ships were beautiful in their own way, but he felt no admiration for their elegant design. They had come to destroy his home, and he would die before letting that happen. "All weapons ready, Captain," his tactical officer reported. Collins nodded, his hand resting on the firing controls. Around him, the crew of the Phoenix prepared to face impossible odds with the same courage that had carried humanity through countless wars against their own kind. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were fighting for their families, their planet, and their species. The Battle of Luna was about to begin. The Battle of Luna began with a sight that had never been seen before in the galaxy. Over 1,000 alien bioships swept toward Earth in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls catching the sunlight like a swarm of deadly jewels. Admiral Kexthar watched from his flagship as the primitive human vessels appeared to retreat toward their home planet. "They are running," he said with satisfaction. "As expected. No species has ever stood against the full might of the Empire." His tactical officer nodded eagerly. "Shall we pursue them into the gravity well, Admiral? We can end this quickly." Kexthar smiled coldly. "Yes. Follow them to their world. I want to see the fear in their eyes when they realize how hopeless their situation truly is." The Zephyrian fleet accelerated toward Earth, drawn deeper into the solar system by what appeared to be a panicked human retreat. The bioships moved like living creatures through space, their organic systems responding to their pilots' thoughts with fluid grace. Aboard the USS Montana, Admiral Kate Rivers watched the alien fleet take the bait. The human withdrawal was perfectly calculated, designed to draw the enemy into the trap that Earth's engineers had spent weeks preparing. Hidden throughout the asteroid belt, automated weapon platforms waited in silence for their moment to strike. "Distance to activation point?" she asked her tactical officer. 60,000 kilometers in closing, Admiral. All platforms are armed and ready." Rivers felt her heart pounding as the enemy fleet drew closer to the invisible line that would trigger humanity's desperate gamble. The aliens had superior numbers and technology, but they had never faced an opponent who understood the true meaning of total war. "All ships prepare for Operation Sledgehammer," she broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember, we only get one chance at this." The moment came when the lead alien ships crossed into the asteroid belt. Suddenly, the space around them erupted in fire as hundreds of hidden weapon platforms activated simultaneously. Railgun rounds and particle beams lanced out from concealed positions among the asteroids, catching the Zephyrian fleet in a devastating crossfire. Admiral Kexthar watched, in shock as his beautiful ships began to die around him. The asteroids themselves were armed, turning the entire belt into one massive weapon system. Bioships that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were torn apart by simple kinetic rounds fired from hidden positions. "Impossible," he screamed. "How did they weaponize an entire asteroid field?" His communications officer was frantically trying to coordinate a response, but the human trap was too well planned. Every time the Zephyrian ships tried to maneuver away from one group of platforms, they exposed themselves to fire from another direction. Captain Steve Collins led his squadron of destroyers in a flanking attack, using the confusion created by the asteroid platforms to strike at the alien fleet's exposed rear. The USS Phoenix and her sister ships emerged from behind Luna like wolves attacking a scattered herd. "All weapons continuous fire," Collins ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The human destroyers opened up with everything they had, their weapons designed for the kind of close-range combat that had dominated Earth's naval battles for centuries. The aliens had never encountered such brutal, straightforward tactics, and their elegant formations began to collapse under the assault. Captain Amy Foster brought the USS Virginia into the heart of the battle, her super dreadnought's massive guns targeting the largest alien vessels. The ship's main battery could fire rounds the size of small buildings, and each shot tore through enemy hulls like they were made of paper. "Target their flagship," she commanded. "Let's cut the head off this snake." The Virginia's guns swiveled toward Admiral Kexthar's bioship, the massive vessel that served as the command center for the entire alien fleet. The first salvo missed, but the second found its mark, punching through the crystalline hull and into the ship's vital organs. Kexthar felt his flagship dying around him as human weapons tore through its living structure. The bioship's pain echoed in his mind through the neural link that connected all Zephyrian vessels to their crews. For the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be truly afraid. "All ships, retreat," he ordered desperately. "Fall back to hyperspace." But the human trap was complete. As the surviving alien ships tried to escape, they found their path blocked by fresh human reinforcements arriving from the outer planets. The Mars shipyards had been working without rest, and Admiral Rivers had timed their arrival perfectly. Captain Jake Murphy led the reinforcement fleet aboard the USS Dakota, his battle-scarred cruiser accompanied by dozens of newly constructed warships. The fresh human vessels fell upon the retreating aliens like hungry sharks, their weapon systems still warm from the factory floors. No survivors, Murphy broadcast to his fleet. "These things came here to destroy our world. We make sure they never get the chance to try again." The slaughter that followed would be remembered as one of the most decisive battles in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest fleet was torn apart piece by piece, their elegant bioships reduced to glowing debris that would drift through the solar system for decades to come. Admiral Kexthar's flagship was among the last to die. As human, particle beams finally breached his ship's core. The proud alien commander had just enough time to send a final message to his homeworlds. The transmission was brief and filled with disbelief. "The primitives have won," he whispered into his communicator. "The Empire is doomed." The message would reach Zephyrian space 3 days later, carrying news that would shatter a civilization that had believed itself invincible. In the span of a few hours, humanity had destroyed the largest fleet in alien history, and proven that the galaxy had a new dominant species. As the last alien ship exploded in the cold vacuum of space, Admiral Kate Rivers allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Earth was safe, but she knew this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had made enemies of every species that had served the Zephyrian Empire. The real war was just beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Luna, Captain Jake Murphy stood on the observation deck of the USS Dakota as it patrolled the former Zephyrian trade routes. The space that had once been filled with elegant alien bioships now hosted the angular forms of human vessels, their hulls scarred from battle but victorious. The Zephyrian Empire had collapsed completely after news of their fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy. Without their military might to enforce order, the 17 core worlds had descended into chaos. Some had surrendered immediately to advancing human forces, while others had simply gone silent, their populations fleeing into the outer rim territories. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Foster reported from the communications station, "we're receiving a surrender offer from the Zephyrian colony on Kepler 442b. They're asking for protection from local rebel groups." Murphy nodded grimly. It was the same story on dozens of worlds. The alien empire had ruled through fear and superior technology, but when that technology proved useless against human weapons, their entire civilization had crumbled like a house built on sand. "Accept their surrender and dispatch a peacekeeping force," he ordered. "Make it clear that we're not here as conquerors, we're here to restore order." Admiral Lisa Santos reviewed similar reports from her flagship, the USS Liberty, now the command vessel for what had become known as the Terran Federation Fleet. The massive super dreadnought orbited a former Zephyrian world where human engineers were helping local populations rebuild their infrastructure. The collapse of the empire had revealed the true scope of Zephyrian oppression. For 3,000 years, they had enslaved dozens of species across hundreds of worlds, using their advanced technology to crush any attempt at rebellion. Now, with their masters gone, these enslaved peoples were tasting freedom for the first time in millennia. "Admiral," her aide reported, "the Kronar delegation has agreed to join the Federation. They're offering to share their mining technology in exchange for military protection." Santos smiled. The Kronar were a reptilian species that had been forced to work in Zephyrian crystal mines for over 2,000 years. Their knowledge of alien technology was proving invaluable as humanity tried to understand the vast empire they had inherited. "Excellent. What about the Vextai?" "Still undecided. They're grateful for their freedom, but they're not sure they want to accept human leadership. Can't say I blame them." The Vextai were an insectoid species with highly advanced mathematical abilities. They had been used by the Zephyrians as living computers, forced to calculate hyperspace routes and manage trade logistics. After so many centuries of slavery, it was understandable that they would be suspicious of any new authority. General Paul Martinez faced similar challenges from his headquarters on Earth, now serving as the first Galactic Defense Coordinator. The title still felt strange to him, but someone had to manage the transition from a human solar system to a galactic civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. "Status report on the Colonial Establishment Program," he requested from his staff. "Proceeding. Ahead of schedule, General. We have functional colonies on 47 former Zephyrian worlds, with more being established every week. The biggest challenge is finding enough qualified administrators." Martinez chuckled despite himself. Humanity had gone from a single-world species to masters of a galactic empire in less than a year. The learning curve was steep, but humans had always been good at adapting to impossible situations. The industrial capacity that had won the war was now being converted to peaceful purposes. The same shipyards that had produced dreadnoughts were now building exploration vessels and colony ships. The factories that had manufactured weapons were producing construction equipment and agricultural machinery. Captain Amy Foster commanded one of the new exploration vessels, the USS Discovery, as it charted systems that had been off-limits during Zephyrian rule. Her mission was to make contact with species that had hidden from the Empire for centuries, offering them the chance to join the growing Federation. "Captain, we're detecting artificial structures in the next system," her science officer reported. "Looks like a space station of unknown design." Foster felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had driven humanity to the stars. Every system they explored revealed new wonders, new species with their own unique technologies and cultures. The galaxy was far more diverse and interesting than the Zephyrians had ever allowed anyone to know. "Take us in slowly," she ordered. "Full diplomatic protocols. Let's see who our new neighbors are." The space station belonged to a species called the Quillen, a race of energy beings who had been hiding in the outer rim for over 1,000 years. When Zephyrian scouts had first found their world, the Quillen had used their mastery of electromagnetic fields to make their entire solar system appear empty and lifeless. "You are the humans," the Quillen ambassador said, when contact was finally established. "We have heard of your victory over the crystal tyrants. Many species speak of you with hope." Foster smiled as she realized how much the galaxy had changed. Species that had lived in fear for millennia were now emerging from hiding, eager to be part of a new galactic community based on cooperation rather than domination. Back on Earth, children who had been born during the war were now taking their first steps. They would grow up in a galaxy where humanity was not alone, where the stars held friends as well as mysteries. The generation that had fought the Zephyrians had secured not just Earth's freedom, but the freedom of countless other worlds. Admiral Kate Rivers, now retired from active duty, often stood in her garden and looked up at the night sky. The stars no longer seemed cold and distant. They were filled with human ships and human colonies, with alien allies and new friends. Humanity had learned to reach beyond their own world without losing what made them human. The galaxy that had once trembled under Zephyrian rule now looked to Earth for guidance, not because humans were the strongest or most advanced species, but because they had proven something that no other civilization had managed in 3,000 years. They had shown that cooperation could triumph over oppression, that diversity was stronger than uniformity. The age of human expansion had begun, and the stars themselves seemed brighter for it.